And I will also mute myself. So Ellice, if you want to welcome people when they come in, you're welcome to do that.
Sounds good.
Good morning and welcome. It is wonderful to be with all of you for day 3 of the Arts Equity Summit. My name is Marion Taylor Brown and I am part of the ACI team, and I'm currently on our board of directors. And today we're going to hear from the phenomenal Ellice Patterson for her session called Reimagining Rehearsal Processes in Virtual Spaces. And rumor has it, Ellice is going to get us moving today too. So thank you in advance for that. Ellice, before we get started, I'm going to take a minute to just go over our technology protocol, our land acknowledgement, as well as reading your phenomenal bio so that everybody knows how much of a badass you are. So first, with technology, if you are new to Zoom, please feel free to check out the Zoom packet that ACI provided at the beginning of the weekend. A couple of things: if you want to see Ellice in full screen or predominantly instead of all of our faces, you can go to speaker view, which is up at your right top corner. If you want to see everybody's beautiful smiling face this morning, you are welcome to stay on the community view, which will give you aspects of everybody here. As a reminder, these sessions are recorded, which means that if you have things going on in your house that you'd rather not have us see, it's totally okay to take off your video and or to keep yourself on mute. And just as a kind reminder, you are welcome to go to the bathroom or do anything else you need to. Just please don't take us with you, which unfortunately has happened on Zoom calls. So just real reminder. And the last piece of that, if you have trouble with your connection, sometimes turning off your video can help. And you can also use the dial-in number if needed. So for ACI, we believe it's really important to do a land acknowledgement at the beginning of every session, so I'll be reading that now. At Arts Connect International, we believe that one of the roles of the arts is to elevate and celebrate the voices of Indigenous artists. Therefore, as committed allies and as artists, Arts Connect International wishes to acknowledge that the ground on which we are based, which is Boston, Massachusetts, is the traditional land of several Native peoples, including the I cannot talk this morning, I apologize. Massachusetts, Nipmuc, and Wampanoag, and that through forced migration, relocation, and conflict, Boston, Massachusetts is now home to many Native peoples. We recognize their continued survival and stewardship of this land. Wherever you are, we encourage you to learn more about the Indigenous peoples of the lands you are on and the ways in which you can honor and respect all people. So now moving on to passing this over to Ellice and just giving a little insight. If you are new to Ellice and Abilities Dance, please check out Abilities Dance. They're doing phenomenal work. And Ellice is the founder of this company, and she is also the director. And Abilities Dance is a Boston-based nonprofit that welcomes dancers with and without disabilities. Outside of Abilities Dance, Ellice's choreography has appeared in Bates Dance Festival, Lynx Hall in Chicago, Gibney in New York City, Green Street Studios Garage Festival, Boston Contemporary Dance Festival, and the series Volume 4, and at the Alvin Ailey Theater. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Biological Sciences from Wesleyan College and her Master's of Science in Management and Studies from Boston University Questrom School of Businesses. And fun fact, you should ask her about spiders sometime. So Ellice, with no further ado, I will pass it over to you. Thank you for kicking off the morning for all of us with joy.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm just going to go through my presentation and have some conversation. Feel free to stop and pause with any questions. I believe you can do it in the chat function, but definitely ask Marion about that. So I'll get started. I'm also going to be explaining the images on the screen as an access point for any blind low vision audience members that might be attending. So I kind of have been thinking about that and rephrased the presentation a little bit to talk about reimagining our artistic processes in this COVID-19 time and beyond. And pictured is three of our dancers, Janelle is our wheelchair user who's holding Lauren bent in front of her, and then another dancer, Lauren, who is completely arched behind her in a really cool piece that we just did last month. So talking about our agenda today, we're going to talk about how accommodations are universal because currently everyone is in need of some form of accommodation, how we really work, because we have created empowering work separately but together for years now, and really what does that mean for you? So how can we work together to promote equitable practices in our artistic processes during this time and beyond? So I'm going to put this here. So COVID-19 really brought to light our biases because during this time when everything has been affected, from our economy to our health to everything, everyone is in need of accommodation, and we saw just how easily roles and practices can be adapted to accommodate for a variety of needs. This is something that the disability community has been fighting for a long time, and so now it's kind of brought a sense of validation to the work that we're doing. And it's really opening up questions and conversations of how we can adapt roles for everyone, because accommodations are universal. And pictured to the right is two of our dancers holding each other. So let me give you kind of a brief intro of my background. So I've been dancing off and on since I was 4. I felt like dance was not a viable career path for me, and so I went into science and did research with spiders in Costa Rica and other countries, and kind of came back to it during my time at BU, but felt like there wasn't access for me in the Boston area, whether that meant that the spaces themselves weren't accessible or choreographers weren't able or willing to adapt their practices to kind of incorporate my particular needs. And when one company director told me that she wouldn't adapt her practice because it was a professional company, I figured I would create a professional company. So Abilities Dance really created or came out of my own need for access and artistic practices. And so just from my own need has developed this really great and vibrant organization with a lot of different artists contributing themselves to the work. And pictured to the left is an image of me in my Wakanda walker. And the guiding quote that I use is actually an article from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948, where it says that everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community and to enjoy the arts. So it's a human right that we all are able to access and participate in the arts, whether that means as an audience member, as an artist, as a choreographer, etc. And so that really has propelled this company forward, just knowing that that's a human right, and also being able to express that to audiences, to be able to incorporate that in their own practices. And in the background is just a point photo. So our virtual practices are integrated into our core artistry. Our artists are actually located across the country, with one international artist in Sri Lanka. Google Hangouts and Skype rehearsals have been the norm for our dancers for years. I won't go into the variety of the different types of video platforms because we're pretty familiar with that now. But I will say that my favorite is Google Hangouts because there's actually a caption aspect to it, and it can be 50-50, right? And it's also helpful because I have an advisor who's hard of hearing who utilizes that when I send him videos of our rehearsals. So our composers and musicians as well see rehearsal videos and email drafts of the music to be shared with choreographers before and during rehearsals. Our composers are actually located in Georgia, Texas, and we have a musician in Nebraska. And so they utilize the rehearsal videos that we create from our dancers to create the music. They send email drafts to the choreographer or me to kind of have this feedback process through email, sending back and forth the different drafts. Our composer that works with our saxophone player in Nebraska actually kind of does that internal feedback with him to be able to incorporate the live sax version that is added to his music that is then sent to our choreographers. So it's definitely a really cool feedback process. And within the choreographers and dancers themselves, they are able to kind of really create through video with our New York-based and Vermont-based choreographers, and to be able to kind of explore and play virtually but still together, being really clear in how the creation is made, but also allowing for some play, since in video precision is not always the best, since there is kind of there can be blurry videos, I guess, and so if the internet connection is not ideal, so being able to be okay with that, kind of letting go of the precision and correctness and allowing for the own dancers to experiment and play with the story and create from there. So while all of that is happening, we also have audio descriptions, which are words that explain the movement for blind and vision audience members. And we incorporate that over the music as a form of universal design so that everyone can experience as close to the same thing as possible. We have an editor, Amber Piercy, who is amazing, who is a blind consultant to the arts, who edits audio descriptions to make sure they're of use to the community. And those are sent through Word docs, since PDFs can sometimes interfere with the screen readers, and screen readers are a thing online that enables blind and low vision folks to access it. Internet things. So those Word docs are sent to her, and they kind of have this feedback process as well. So through email, Facebook messaging, and video, these really cool and amazing pieces are created. The only difference right now is during this time, there is even more consistent check-ins, adapting, and rescheduling is needed to put the artist's mental health first, because that's really important, to be able to say that it's okay if you're not feeling 100% right now, or it's okay if you need to reschedule, because we really want to make sure that our artists are healthy and safe. So our virtual classes within our education program actually started because of access barriers. When the MBTA began renovations last year, it posed a serious barrier to access. Some of the shuttle buses weren't accessible, or they were delayed, or a variety of different access issues. And so we were losing students because of that. And so we began to experiment with virtual classes that way, which has really been helpful in retaining our students. And they're also taught by disabled teaching artists, because having that representation in teaching, I felt, is really important, not just for understanding, but being able to say that we can be teaching artists. And now, during this time, we've offered Instagram Live classes, kind of jumping on that bandwagon with everyone else, with suggested donations going directly to our teaching artists so that they're able to be supported during this time as well. So I thought I'd share a little phrase with you from our class yesterday, taught by our great Louisa Mann. It didn't capture everything like the rest of our company members, as well as me, in addition to the adapted seating version that I'm doing. But if you'd so like, we can do it together and explore and move during this time. So I'll play a little bit. I'll do the seated version, and we can jump along. Sound cool? Cool, cool. All right, I just did a grid version so I can see all of you, but I'll just play the first like 30 seconds.
Rush through, arms, switch, third.
Ooh. So, play that again.
Rush through, arms, switch.
So, we can push back a little if you have a little space.
Switch third, rush through.
So, actually in my wheelchair right now, but rush through. Turn. Arms. Circle through. 2 here. We're winding in. We're here. We turn. Our arms rotate around to what we call third here. Lovely. One more time for funsies. We're here. Push up. Arms rotate to there. Lovely. And because mirroring and things can be confusing, in our classes, we don't really focus on specifics of right or left. It's more about just kind of retaining the movement and retaining the movement for you. I have my wheelchair, and so I kind of show that version of being able to transition her legs and show that for our wheelchair dancers as well. So just a little taste of what we're doing in our classes. All right, figure out how to back. And there. So it is important to note the barriers of this type of practice. It requires internet connection, which can already be an access barrier for those who can't afford it, or in rural communities who simply don't have broadband, which is a very real thing. The town where I'm from actually doesn't have broadband, and so Wi-Fi is an issue which they're working with their cities to create. But noting that barrier is important. And in classes, you also can't fully focus on bodies in the same way that you can in person and note if a student is moving incorrectly. So that's also an important thing to note, because not only can that reinforce incorrect technique, but also could potentially be hazardous and an injury if it's too extreme. So it's important to note that as well. So what happens post-pandemic? It's important to think about how we can readapt these practices now, but also what happens beyond this pandemic time when we're able to kind of get back into our norm, but will our norm be exclusive to those who have been utilizing these access needs that they've been craving for so long and reinforcing that hard barrier again. So I just want to open up for conversation and talk about how people are moving or how people are in their own artistic practices thinking about how they can open the door for others. So that's really what this presentation is about, figuring out how we can reimagine these spaces to be more inclusive. So I will exit here, maybe, figure out how to do that. Okay, cool. So tell me, what are thoughts, questions, concerns in the space, in the industry, all that kind of stuff, because I really want to have a conversation with people. Or you can put it in the chat box.
Ellice, are you okay with people also just unmuting themselves to?
Yeah, absolutely.
I see Melissa's hand is up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good morning. Thank you for that presentation and for your work. I am creating a piece that was going to be a flash mob that we got on and off the MBTA in honor of Nakba Day, which is a holiday. It's the day, a commemoration of the day that Palestinians were expulged from what is now Israel. And it means catastrophe in Arabic. And it was going to be a poem that a Palestinian woman has written, and we were going to perform it with movement. Now, we're trying to do it online, and it really opens up all the possibilities. And it's like, duh, why wasn't I even thinking about this before? I mean, for me, it was like, well, it's really hard to include somebody to jump onto an MBTA and off, to be able to do access in that way. But now it's like, okay, we're just doing little videos, and I don't know about the question is really, now that we're all, there is some equalizing in that we're all using the same access and we have this barrier. It's like an invitation. It's like, oh my God, my company has incorporated since the beginning ASL interpretation, and we do that from the start. So we have that, but not the physicality. We don't have that part. And so I'm just like, wow, I want to work with you. I want to open that up as like, if there's interest in that kind of work, and just, I find it really exciting what you're doing, and grateful that we have this space.
Thank you. And we should definitely email and chat further about how we can work together for sure.
Yeah.
I think I saw a question from Celia about our audio description practice. So our audio descriptions are two things. One is obviously to provide access for those blind low vision audiences, but also I put it specifically over the music because I really want to kind of force that conversation of how we can adapt our practices to include that more, since they're really not common in the Boston area. And so we created, it depends on the piece or the performance, but usually our choreographers are the ones who are creating the audio descriptions since they're the one creating the movement. And so it can be as poetic or as artistic as they like, but the real focus is to think of the specific intentions of their pieces and the focuses, and then explaining that movement, whether it be the right arm arcs across, or the body moves, or the wheelchair is moving. And so really focusing on those elements, writing that into the audio descriptions, having our audio descriptions editor, Amber, look over that to make sure they're of use, because currently none of our choreographers are blind or low vision. And so I really want to make sure that it passes through someone from that community so that we're not imposing our own thoughts of what is accessible or not. And then having that back and forth editing feedback process, they record their own voice just through their phones. And then our composers add those recordings over the music. And then we practice with it and perform it.
So I'm sorry, I've been running around the house, which is why I've had my video off. I'm Celia, and I'm in Austin, and I have a company called Body Shift, and I'm a describer too. So I've been describing dance for a long time, which is why I'm really interested that you actually integrate it into your performance. And so you said that the choreographer writes it, but it is vetted by a person who has low vision?
Absolutely. We don't want to impose what we think, but making sure that it's someone from the community to make sure that it is capturing the same elements that we want to capture for those performances.
So does that work exist somewhere that I could actually look at it and show it to some of my company members?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually did a Facebook Live of our last performance in March, right before everything shut down. So you can go on our Facebook page, facebook.com/abilitiesdanceboston, and see that and hear the audio descriptions through the music.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In addition to that, just for other access things, we also offer Braille programs and large print programs as well.
So do you have a audience, a following of folks who are blind or have low vision?
We do. Once we've started creating that, it kind of spread word so that people know that if they come into these performances, it's already expected that they'll have those access needs.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And also to note, separately for our deaf, hard of hearing audience, we also have CART, which is live captioning in our performances, so that we heard from a dancer that we previously had who was newly deaf, who didn't know ASL, and so ASL interpreters weren't helpful for her. And so including those live captioning was an access point that we included, in addition to having folks know what CART is and able to integrate that into the performance as well.
So if I can ask another question, you said that in the beginning you didn't think that the dance world was for you, or that you had trouble accessing classes. Once you decided that you had to be a dancer, because you were a dancer, how did you go about finding classes, and how did you find people who would accommodate your needs? And was that in Boston that happened? Have you always been in Boston, or were you in other places?
So I'm actually originally from Mississippi, but I've spent most of my time in Boston now. But yeah, I found a lot of my access barriers in Boston just because simply a lot of our dance studios then weren't accessible, like they're physically accessible, or that teachers weren't really knowledgeable of how to accommodate their practices. And so kind of through going into classes, figuring out how to accommodate for myself, and then kind of creating my own sort of pedagogy that I used in my company.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank
I'm going to look forward to finding out more about you on your work.
Thank you. What else are we pondering, questioning within our own company, within your practice? Really want to make it a conversation instead of just a straight up lecture that you may or may not retain 10 minutes later because it's Sunday.
I'm curious just how you think, as you started doing this, if you feel like the issue of accessibility in dance has changed in Boston. You know, what?
Can you talk a little louder? So sorry.
Sorry. Do you, like, since you've started doing this, how do you think the dance community in Boston has improved, not improved when it comes to accessibility? I'm just curious to see, like, what change you've seen since you started doing this.
Yeah, I think that there is more of an acceptance of this form of dance on a professional platform, just through seeing the work that we've done and the places we've been, working with the MFA or the Peabody Essex Museum, and sort of kind of seeing the vision come to life has been really helpful in understanding this type of accessibility. I think there's still barriers since a lot of our spaces still aren't accessible, and some teachers still aren't willing to accommodate their practices. So I think we still have a long way to go in that form, but I think we're slowly but surely getting there.
As a quick piece, when people are introducing themselves, if you don't mind, just so that we can continue to build community with each other, introducing who you are by name, where you're calling in from, since we're now in a global audience space, and also what your context is. So whether that's in your own artistic practice or in others. So Arlene, do you mind if I invite you to share that?
Sure. So I'm here in Boston. I'm an art admin. I'm also a dancer. And so I'm definitely interested in, you know, how to make just my dance world more accessible and just the Boston art community in general.
Are there, for you and anyone else, are there specific questions you might have on adapting your practices, or comments or questions for us and what we're doing?
I'm going to jump in. Good morning. My name is Charles. I use he, him, his. I actually work for the Mass Cultural Council, and people I see in the call, it's very nice to see. I have a question, and it's based on where all the boxes are on my tablet. Go to Melissa. I'd really like to know the company you work for, since you said you've been incorporating ASL from the start. The program I run is kind of looking at the barriers in our life through the disability lens. And so I'm always intrigued with creative practice. And that's really my question to Ellice, which is about this idea of the creative practice. Working with the artists to intentionally include the description, I think is interesting. Do you do and then having it vetted by Amber, who I also know, so people within the community. Do you do the same with your American Sign Language, working with deaf folk and the interpreter? You know, that tension between interpretation and embodiment kind of sometimes exists.
So we haven't on that front yet, though that is something that I'm looking to explore. Well, what would have been in our next show in June, but in this fall is something that I'm looking to explore more of, how we can kind of think about how we're translating our work to different audiences and really including those in the community so that we're being as intentional as possible and respectful for those folks.
Have any of the dancers, choreographers on this call worked with text or in any sort of scenic manner? In the same context of description, interpretation, this idea of captioning in real time, and text language as part of a scenic perspective. I wonder if any had done that before.
I'll just jump in that besides Red Sage Stories, which is my company, I'm also a member of Escena Latina Teatro. And every summer we do Theater in the Park in Jamaica Plain in Mozart Street. And we always have super translations. And so there's a huge television screen that's going on in English in live time, and somebody is actually doing the translations right at that time, interpretations, and no, those are translations. So that's happening in bilingual communities or bilingual shows, yeah.
Charles, I worked on this is Celia again from Austin. I worked on a piece a long time ago in New York City that was kind of ahead of its time, but we actually projected the text on screen. It was part of the set, and as it was not a dance piece, it was a theater piece. And as the actors read their lines, they would walk over and point to the lines as it was coming up on the walls. And I don't remember all of it. I remember the walls, and I remember we had a projection of the writer sitting behind his typewriter, projected above the stage like it was a super title. But there was lots of interaction with the text and with the words and with real-time captioning happening on the stage all throughout the performance, which was very interesting. I mean, it was almost distracting to what was happening. The playwright was very involved in words and the meaning of words and the concept of words and how we put words together and everything. So yeah, it was a fun set to build. It was a fun show to manage. I was the stage manager, and the actors had a great time with it because they were actually not only riffing off of each other as performers, but they were actually tearing the words apart as they were on the walls and things like that. So it was very interesting.
I have a question for Ellice. When you are working in all your independent areas and using the video for your rehearsal, has there ever been a time where you haven't come together as a company to share a space and elevate that as a performance?
Yes, definitely. Towards closer to our performance dates, we tend to bring all of the dancers together to kind of put all of these pieces together, and so that they're able to kind of practice in the space with each other, work on spacing and things, and kind of work on how they're creating their, I guess, dancer chemistry, if you will, together. The composers don't really come in until the end, just for kind of editing the music and the space. Our director of music, Andrew Cho, who is amazing, tends to fine tune all of those things during tech rehearsals. But really closer towards the end is when we tend to come together, and from virtual to in person. Sherry, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just I'm trying to actually make my way to the unmute. First of all, I'm a huge fan of you and your work. So to be in this small community setting and listening to you, I'm really inspired this morning. I'm working with a group. I'm Jerry. I'm at the Wheelock Family Theater. I do a lot of youth work with youth on creating pieces of theater, musical theater, dance, etc. And you know, the Wheelock Family Theater has been in a learning stance around this work of inclusivity, which we continue to be for almost 40 years now. So But I'm right now, we had started a musical theater production of the Drowsy Chaperone with a group of about 30 teenagers when this all happened. And we have moved to remote rehearsals. And, you know, this idea of how to take what is, my lens was what I'm missing, you know, was just this lens of limitation and kind of deficit of, you know, I can't do this, you know, like I can't do it as well because it's not in person. And this has really caused me to shift about how I can do it differently. And maybe some aspects of it could even be better. And, you know, so that idea of how we can take this, shift our lens to then think about how it opens up more access and more opportunities, and take that learning with us, you know, not leave it behind and say it's just something of COVID-19, but really take it with us as sort of the gifts of COVID-19, if you can say that, to help us think about our practice differently. Because it's been very interesting in the rehearsal room, just as you talked about, not being able to see every dancer, you know, on a Zoom screen, not being able to give that feedback. But what has happened is this incredible creativity from the kids around, you know, can we use the lens of the screen of the Zoom box and play around with just dancing with a shoulder, you know, just dancing, you know, dancing seated, you know, just putting the camera on our feet, you know, and that has really opened up this whole different way of thinking about choreography for me, that it can be playing with the viewpoint as opposed to actually physically moving dancers in this shared space. So I don't know, if you thought about, we're now trying to figure out how we share that. So I'm curious if you've had any sharings that have been virtually done as opposed to ultimately being able to come together.
You mean like, have we just continued the virtual to like a virtual performance type of thing?
You know, anything like that?
We haven't yet. That was something I'm thinking of, just because we really enjoy interacting with our communities in person and having that. But this has also had us consider how can we still interact with our community virtually, and which we've kind of done through our classes. But we're definitely thinking of how we can do it performance-wise, because we love our folks and we want to continue doing the work that we're doing even in this time. And we are kind of on the back end still creating and processing per usual, which is great that we haven't really changed our process. So it's been a sense of normalcy in that sense. But I'm glad you're still continuing to do the rehearsals, and I'm sure with teenagers that can be a whole thing. So okay. Best of luck.
Oh, thank you. They're very resilient. They really are very creative.
Elise, we have a question from Audrey in the chat. And Audrey says, "Hi, Elise. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the rise of virtual performances in this time. What are people doing well and what is missing in this format for us newcomers? Thank you for leading the way with these accessibility measures."
Thank you. I think that the rise of virtual performances is amazing, and that there have been folks who, you know, haven't been able to access performances because maybe the space itself wasn't accessible, or they just had a high pain day and couldn't go that day. And so I'm thinking in that sense, it's really great to be able to provide that. There's still room to go within that access. A lot of the performances that I'm seeing haven't been like captioned or ASL interpreted. There is still like a lack of audio descriptions if needed within the video. And just being able to provide those points of access are missing. So I think we still have some room to go with that. And talking to folks that are doing that, I think is really important, so that we're able to build on audiences and kind of continue during that time. So, question for all of you. How has this time kind of force you to think about how you can shift your practices, or how you can involve more of not just the disability community, but other communities as well, and kind of how are you starting to rethink that?
I'm Joe. I'm based in Boston. I organize queer dance workshops as just part of my work. And we've been in a very slow process of figuring out how to become more accessible. And one of the things that became very clear very quickly is that anxiety is a major access barrier for creating space, particularly if we're talking about queer populations. And a lot of the work I do has always been talking to people who are absolutely convinced that dance is not for them, and trying to say, maybe you think that, and maybe that's true, but what's a way we can explore that and think about how dance could be for you? And so I think when I had to cancel the next 2 workshops, my immediate reaction was, how can I bring dance to other people? And I struggle a lot with virtual stuff, and I struggle a lot with video and that, so I hadn't actually thought about it until that point, and it was a really exciting push. And so now I am having trouble with making videos. I don't think that's my personal solution, but I am thinking a lot about how can I organize things like video classes where people can keep their video off, people can find other ways to feel safe and try movement on their own terms, which has been really interesting to think about.
I'm glad you're thinking about how you can open up and adapt it just for you and the communities that you work with. I'd also recommend, if anxiety is a thing, maybe having a one-on-one session with different folks so that they feel like they can open up and are able to connect in that way, so you can still see them and see what they're doing and be able to create together.
Yeah, I found one-on-one sometimes scares people more. It's a real balance of figuring out what's right for each person.
Yeah, exactly. That's also in the work that we do, kind of realizing that every person is completely different, and how can we readapt to make sure that everyone feels safe and included to do their work. So props to you. Karen.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, I want to say one of the things that we've run into is the inaccessibility still of the online platforms. We have some people who are unable to manipulate buttons and push, and if they don't have anyone in the home to do that for them, the online platforms are not voice activated, so they are able to participate. The captioning is not, you have to hire a captioner to come in, as far as we can see, which I do, but I can't do that for every single thing. So I'm hoping that that the companies that produce these online platforms are actually paying attention and realizing that they need to do this better, because again, we have some real barriers to our participation, some new barriers now. Before we have the old barriers, and now we have new barriers. And so it's wondering if anyone had found platforms that worked better for them in this situation, like Wheelwright, and have you found platforms that are more accessible, or for folks that don't really have maybe really good internet access at their home, those types of things. I'd like to hear what people have to say about that.
Google Hangouts does have audio to text or captioning, which can be hit or miss, but it has been fairly well for someone that I've worked with. So I would recommend using that. And it's also easy because it adds automatically to your calendar, which is so helpful for me.
And we just have some folks have issues with getting into Google and Google Hangouts. Every platform has its own little issue. Yeah, but that's good to know. Thank you.
Karen.
Yeah. Hi, Ellice. Hi, everybody. So great to see everyone on this Sunday. My name is Karen Young. I'm in Boston. I'm a cultural organizer. I play Japanese taiko drums. And the current program I've been, my main project is called Older and Bolder, where I'm working with elders who are primarily 70 to 90 years old. And I feel like really the time has really changed from week to week, how I'm adapting. You know, at first it was just so stunning for me, you know, to just try to get myself in shape to be able to be here and sort of in a mental state to be able to kind of reach out. That took a little bit, but my first priority was really just to connect the elders at first, because so many of them are on their own. So that meant a lot of phone calls and a lot of connecting them with each other and giving them phone numbers so they could call each other. But then lately, and thanks to the summit, we put together a 1-hour presentation on Older and Bolder, and that really got us to set the bar higher to actually think about how we could use Zoom. And so many of them had a lot of anxieties at first, but we had several rehearsals. And we called upon family members that might be able to help the elders like figure out what to do on the iPhone or what to do on the iPad, or if they had one. And sometimes it was a competition in terms of which family member had the one computer, you know, at home. So we had to kind of think about issues around access that way. But yesterday, we actually stayed online after the Zoom call, and we practiced with breakout groups, and we had our first actual taiko lesson online, where we practiced many times how to get in and out of a breakout group, and they weren't sure how to do it. But it was really successful, and I was really happy because I was able to put advanced students in one breakout group and say, okay, you have this 5 minutes to work on this piece that we've been working on. And there was definitely a lot of anxiety about whether or not they could do it and come back. But the summit was just an opportunity to really push all of us to really try something. And it was really a great success, and elders felt like they got something. So, and felt they had achieved some success. So I can't wait to see sort of what's next for us.
Karen, I'm just curious because taiko drumming also makes sound, and I'm an Irish dancer, and I'm just wondering how you've been managing audio lag.
Yeah, so I think somebody else said somewhere that like you don't pay attention as much to form or things like that. Also, I'm not paying as much attention to timing. But often what I did yesterday is I just muted everybody and had them follow me. Also with taiko, there's a language that comes with it that can be sung. So people are trying to sing with me. Sometimes what I do is what I had is had other people lead pieces of it. So even though we all know the same song, we all sing it. Obviously the lag's terrible, but we alternated who was in charge at that moment. And that's what we did at that time.
Thank you.
Our music is that our composers just send the music to our dancers and choreographers so that they're able to just play it on their own as close to the same time as possible. Is that something that Karen, potentially you could experiment with as far as like practicing the piece that you want to play and then sending it to the elders at that time so that they can kind of understand the timing on their own and just kind of figure that out? Is that something?
Yeah. One thing that we did yesterday, again, like this is brand new for us, you know, so we made a recording all together with me singing and all the elders playing in gallery view at the same time. And so they have now a 2-minute recording of me singing and playing and them all playing together. One of our elders is sick, unfortunately. We just found out that she's in the hospital. So we wanted to be able to create a video for her. She was touch and go for a while, but she's actually getting better. So it's made us feel like we wanted to really send her something. So again, this was a real tool that we could use to send to her family. But that's definitely something that we're going to keep trying. Yeah, that's
also sending healing to your elder who's in the hospital. I hope
Yeah, it's a big concern, obviously, for my whole community.
I see a question about the composers that we work with and how to find them, how to work with them. Our composers have come from a variety of ways. Initially, when I founded the org, I reached out to Berkeley, and that's how I found out about Andrew Cho, who was a student at the time, who created this really amazing music for our very first show, and I just kind of continued on with him, and he became our director of music. One of our composers I actually met, we were sitting on a bus together in New York, and we just I saw that she was working on sheet music, and I can read some sheet music, so I really liked what she was working on. We had a conversation, and she's now in our company and creating really great work. And so they've kind of come from a variety of unique ways. And we work together through, we initially talk about the kind of ideas that I want for the piece initially, and I really give them room to play with their own unique specialties, whether that's cello work or flute work, etc. And then kind of in a back and forth process through email and through seeing rehearsal videos, kind of refine with the piece and with the movement itself. And then later on add the audio descriptions over that and kind of refine and technique as we go. So it's all virtual because they live in New York, Georgia, and Texas and Nebraska. So it's great to be able to incorporate talents from all over the country and be able to provide opportunities in that way. Yeah.
Thanks for your comment, Charlie, and the recognition of distance and travel. We were chatting at the beginning with that. And Ellice, I'm just doing a quick time check because we have quick succession of sessions today. So we should probably wrap up in a couple of minutes. Is it okay if I ask you one big question?
Absolutely.
All right. So you've so graciously shared with us today so many of the different resources and things that have been helpful and that we can apply to our own work and communities. So the question I have for you is, how can we as a community support you in Abilities Dance during this time? What would be helpful and how can we show up?
I think the easiest way to be helpful with the work is to consider access within your own work, because if it's not just an abilities thing, but it should be a universal thing where everyone should be able to go into any type of performance and be able to access. So I think that's the biggest way to support us in the work that we're doing. Also, as our organization, just come to our events, our either virtual classes or just reaching out and figure out how we can attend during this time. And if you are so able to donate any money, we would greatly appreciate it, since we've lost a lot of money through our canceled events, which is our biggest revenue source. So anything that you're able to donate would be amazing, or share along with someone who's able to donate. But just keep talking with us and keep showing up, especially after to our events, and ask questions and encourage folks in your community to think about access in that way. Well, thank you again. Thank you everyone for attending. It's been great. Feel free to follow up if you have any questions at abilitiesdanceboston.org. There's a contact thing that you can reach out. And I hope to see you all soon, virtually or in person later. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellice. So great. I really appreciate this time together.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Karen. It was a nice surprise to see you. And I knew that you visited yesterday. You were presenting yesterday, but there's no hallway time.
I know. It's true.
And then Celia in the room. Good grief.
Come to the hangout. There was a nice hangout last night. Yeah.
Balancing my Zoom time
Right.
is a thing that I really have to pay attention to.
It's real. It's real.
Anyone who's still on the call, because I know it's being recorded. So the Universal Participation Initiative at the Mass Cultural Council supports and invests in universal design, which at this point I'm calling human-centered design. But it's really tough to find on the website. So it's a shout out for the recording, and we can follow up later.
Great. We'll talk more.
We will. And thank you, everyone. It was really nice to see you all this morning.
Yeah, it's great to hear what everybody's doing, and love, Ellice, the fact that you've incorporated description into your work. I've done that for a while, so I'm really excited to go and check you out and see what kinds of things you're doing, and maybe connect with you a little later after the conference. I'd like to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's amazing.
How we can work with different orgs.
Yeah, it's great.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, I hate to leave, but
Yep. Bye, everybody.
bye, guys.
Gotta go drink.
Thank you, guys. It's awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great job, Ellice. Thank you for everything. I've got to unfortunately coordinate with another room right now, so I'm going to end us out, but thank you. See you soon.